Welcome back to the Baal HaSulam's Matan Torah with commentary by Rebbe Avraham Morechai Gottlieb. We're going to be starting the essay of A Time to Act today, which as far as the giving translation is actually the first essay of the book. We started with Matan Torah as it's the namesake of the collection of essays, and for good reason. That was the recommendation by the Rebbe Shita. For those of you who are connecting to this for the first time, to give a short introduction, as this is a separate essay in itself, the Baal HaSulam was one of the greatest of his generation. Without a doubt, he was the greatest Kabbalist of his generation. Why? Because the greatest of his generation came to him to seek counsel in regards to questions pertaining to Kabbalah and spirituality. He was of a Hasidic background. When he came to Eretz Yisrael from Poland, he took on the customs of Yerushalayim, of Jerusalem, but afterwards found it to be more fitting to go back to the old garb and customs. He was proficient in the entire Talmud with all of its commentaries by the time he was 14. By the time he was 18, he claimed that he was an Adam. Adam, man, is similar to the language of Adam al-Elyon, similar to the Most High, as said in Yeshayahu. Man is similar to the Most High by being giving and loving and altruistic. So the truest definition of man is to mean to already be at an elevated level of consciousness that is close to the Creator's. At 24, given personal diary entries that we see of his experience of certain levels of spiritual consciousness and the dynamics of them and how he reacted to them, he finished his tikkun at the age of 24. In short, he was, again, amongst the greatest, if not the greatest of the generation. And he wrote these essays in order to provide a fundamental knowledge of the soul of Judaism. And it's a great merit for us to connect to this learning, as he was a great individual. People today are searching for spirituality. Jews alone, for example, the large majority of Buddhists in America are Jewish. Israelis, after they are done with high school, before they end done with the army, before they go into college, they tend to do traveling. And they try to find themselves in places of the East. In essence, Jews find themselves looking for themselves and looking for spirituality in every place but home. We here are going to attempt to describe why everything anyone's ever been looking for is already at home, so to speak. The Baal HaSulam begins. For a long time now, qualms of conscience have been pursuing me daily, pushing me to make an exception to my usual conduct by writing and disseminating a fundamental essay on the soul of Judaism, religion, and the knowledge of authentic Kabbalistic wisdom. I do this so that people will gain a proper recognition and understanding of the true character and nature of these exalted matters. The Rebbe Shita says on the spot, Baal HaSulam has stated elsewhere that true Kabbalistic wisdom, that is, its instruction regarding the service of God, needs to be disseminated among all strata of the people before God's final revelation in history. I think this is meaning to say that there are a great many who are not connected to the Torah and the mitzvot whatsoever. And to provide true Kabbalistic wisdom to all strata of individuals will expedite the process of our global refinement, the elevation of our consciousness as we seek to gain a character of altruism in contrast to our egoism. And also, those who are involved in Torah and mitzvot and do involve themselves in Kabbalistic insights and wisdom are often found to be learning it in a scholarly fashion, as opposed to something practical that they exhibit in their lives. And that is amongst the novelties of the Baal HaSulam, is that he is a great fusion, says the Rebbe Shita, of the Arizal and the Baal Shem Tov. As the matters of Kabbalah should enter the heart and should actualize in action as well, in our service for the other, where the other is the creator or other people. The Rebbe Shita continues, otherwise the world will not have sufficient preparation that makes this revelation possible. It will not suffice to absorb the wisdom that religion has already revealed to the general public, for only the authentic Kabbalah can lead to the complete spiritual development of the individual. The Baal HaSulam writes in the Holy Zohar, in a commentary, he delineates each section of the Torah and how it pertains to the Sfirot, in the system of this tree of life, the 10 Sfirot. So, for example, the 5 books of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Chumash, are corresponding to Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferes. And then the books of the prophets is Netzach and Hod. And then the Ktuvim, the writings, is to Malchut. And there's different parameters with Midrashim and the Talmud, but generally speaking, the lower 6 Sfirot, not including Malchut. And he says that the secrets of the Torah, the Kabbalah, is the upper 3. Keter, Chochmah, and Bina. So I'll expand on this teaching and bring it into modern language to say that the 6,000 years of correction that we are in is like a computer program that we're still downloading. We're trying to finish the download. And we've gotten a lot of the download, relatively speaking, because it's already 5,782. To finish the download, we need the remaining information. We need the remaining lights as it pertains to the Sfirot. Meaning to say, to bring the redemption and the complete spiritual development of the individual, we need to finish the download. And the only thing missing in this generation, in terms of what we have in our education system, is an integration of the inner matters of the Torah. And this is the revolution of the Baal HaSulam, is to integrate and balance the education system. Because if the spiritual work was readily available in an orderly and healthy fashion for anyone to connect to, I would imagine there would be less people going off to India or to Buddhism, New Age philosophies, or those who are born in good, strong, beautiful Torah homes and yet still find dryness in their lives and leave the Torah and the mitzvot. Rabbi Chaim Vital, 500 years ago, said repeatedly, the only reason people leave the Torah and the mitzvot is because their soul is not being nourished. In essence, their soul is not being exposed to the inner matters of the Torah, which is like a sweet wellspring. So they find the pleasure elsewhere, because we're beings of pleasure. We're machines of pleasure. That's why Rebbe Breidowitz Shlita, the Kilas Rav of Or Samech, says in a video on YouTube by the Jewish Learning Institute. The video is called What is Kabbalah? And he says there that in a generation that is most coarse and most dark, we need great lights. And he's drawing upon these basic principles that we learn in the Chochmat Emet, and that this is the final generation. We're at the footsteps of an evolution of consciousness, and we're currently going through one, arguably. And to expedite this process and to integrate it efficiently entails that we connect to just that, the matters that pertain to personal development at the deepest levels, slowly but surely, starting from level 0 and slowly working up. So he says, Rebbe Avraham Shlita, that Bubby and Zaidi, grandma and grandpa, didn't necessarily need this type of Torah of the Kabbalah, because they were more refined. But in this generation, it's something that we need more so. We here at the Birkat Shalom Beit Midrash, in the name of the Baal HaSulam, would say undiplomatically that it's a necessity, and that there's no chance whatsoever to fulfill the purpose of our creation without it. That's why the Rebbe Avraham Shlita also said in a Q&A, if anyone wants to begin learning Kabbalah, that they should start with the Baal HaSulam, because his Torah is most clear and is written in a very orderly fashion. And they should start with his Hakdamos. And that one should be aware that there are branches of Torah's Ashlag that are not halachic and not abiding by the tradition of Torah and mitzvot. And that one should be careful where they're getting their sources, because it's very important to connect to authentic channels of information and energy. And he said himself that he had read these introductions and these hakdamos. So I'm confident if the rabbi had gone further and also went into the deeper works as well, that his statement would extend and say, not only someone who wants to begin learning, but also continue to learn the matters, that all of the Torah of the Baal HaSulam is in a very orderly, clear fashion. And it's quite hard to get confused if one has who to defer to, whether it's the text itself that provides definitions and commentaries on every aspect, so that one is not confused. But of course, without a doubt, one must be learning such things under proper guidance of a teacher, ideally a spiritual master. The Rebbe Shlita also says, in regards to the dynamic of the revealed Torah and the concealed Torah as we know it, as it relates to what we're learning here, of the necessity to reveal these matters to bring our final redemption, is that what is commonly called the revealed Torah is really the concealed Torah. And what is commonly called the concealed Torah is really the revealed Torah. Because we become spiritually refined through it, and God becomes revealed. Kabbalah is normally called the concealed Torah because it's hidden away for good reason. And we'll learn a little bit as to why. But that concealed Torah of Kabbalah is actually revealed because it speaks about the Creator openly and consistently, and the different delineations of the experience of the Creator relative to us and our spiritual consciousness and our development. And the light within this Torah is great and refines us. All Torah ideally has the ability to refine us, but it depends on our intention. And the intention can be better veered into the proper path when the text itself is constantly exposing one's mind to the teachings and the ideas regarding giving, receiving, and how it all pertains to our inner work and its relation to the Creator and others. Whereas the revealed Torah, which we learn day to day, is truly concealed because it's in truth very terse and very difficult to understand objectively. And once we've already reached a state of maturity, which can even be as early as 7, 8 years old, let's say, in our cognition, that the literal interpretations of the Torah, though they are important and we should learn them, we need to continue to develop our understanding, and we can't stay there. Because unfortunately, it is often that there are those who are connected to Torah and the mitzvot, and their understanding of the Torah is just as they learned it when they were 7 or 8 years old. And they continue their lives with a 7-year-old understanding of many principles. So we're here to provide the mission statement of, again, balancing, as we want to integrate all of the Torah that we learn within ourselves. Because the truth is that this Torah can be interpreted on all levels as being descriptions of our inner being and inner processes. Let us continue in the text. The Baal HaSulam says, in bygone days in Jewish society, before the printing press was invented, there was no such things as spurious books purporting to describe the soul of Judaism, because there were almost no irresponsible authors. The reason for this was quite simple. An irresponsible person is generally not a well-known figure. Therefore, even if someone had dared to author such a composition, it would not have been worthwhile for a scribe to copy it, as no one would give him the compensation for his work. That generally would cost a considerable sum. Thus, the manuscript would, of necessity, have become lost. And in those days, people who were knowledgeable of matters pertaining to the soul of Judaism also would have had no interest or demand to write books of this sort, since the masses did not sense a need for knowledge of such matters. On the contrary, those who had knowledge were interested in completely concealing the matters known to them for the reason expressed in the verse, "The honor of God is in the concealing of matters," as brought in Mishlei or Proverbs 25:2. For we are commanded to conceal the soul of the Torah and spiritual work from those who have no need for it or are unworthy of it. I think it's important to note here that perhaps the Baal HaSulam means by unworthy, meaning the incorrect intention, that they hope to connect to the soul of the Torah, or any Torah for that matter, in order to gain for themselves alone, not in order to refine themselves, rather to gain reward in this world and the next. And that's how we start. There's no other way. We can't just skip to altruism. The difference is that when we expose ourselves to this learning on a constant basis, we regulate our consciousness to be more self-aware of our egoism, self-aware of our intention. Are we receiving? Are we giving? Whether it's on the spot or when we make a counting of our day, counting of our soul, a cheshbon nefesh, at the end of the day. Either way, we are given the tools to be able to proceed accordingly. This material is not to be demeaned by exhibiting it in shop windows before those who are filled with a base desire to peer at chimneys or to speak with pride of their knowledge. For God's honor obligates us not to cheapen the soul of the Torah in this way. The Rebbe Shita says, in regards to peer at chimneys, people who peer at chimneys are those who merely gaze at the heights of wisdom, but who do not attempt to apply it to their lives. Whether it is the individuals who understand that wisdom exists, understand that it's important, but don't connect to it, don't learn it, don't involve themselves in it. That is the people who peer at chimneys. And perhaps it also is alluding to individuals who do connect to the learning and do connect to the wisdom, but they look at it as a scholarly learning as opposed to a most practical learning in order to integrate tools to best serve the Creator and His children. on the comment of, for God's honor obligates us not to cheapen the sola Torah in this way. I already made a blessing on this prior, for those who are wondering. The Rebbe Shita says, when someone is loved, the beloved's honor is dear in the eyes of the lover, who would therefore not want it to be defiled. Similarly, here we have those for whom God is dear, and therefore they are careful that God's treasures will not come into the hands of the unworthy, or into the hands of those who have no need for them. Excuse me. Baal HaSulam does not intend to say that once there was no such thing as forgery, or that once there was no phenomenon at all of disseminating inauthentic teachings among the masses. Instead, earlier times are depicted in contrast to the possibility of printing today, where everyone has a computer and can print a book, and also the cost is relatively not great. Therefore, there are many books today that are from people who are not sincere, and yet these books are disseminated among the general public. Because of this, Baal HaSulam was stirred to write his books so that the masses could be exposed to the authentic Kabbalah and not just the teachings of nonsense and falsehood. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan Zatzal says that Kabbalah is the tradition of the Jewish people with a capital T. That's why it's called Chochma Te'emet. It's the real stuff. It's what's actually going on in the Torah, and explains to us what's really going on within. This Kabbalistic tradition stems all the way back to our forefathers, Avraham Yitzchak and Yaakov Avinu. As due to their spiritual consciousness and great refinement, they knew the Torah and its laws and details and secrets by means of their attainments and revelations. After them, from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, having received the Torah from the Creator, and then giving it to Yehoshua, and then the elders, the prophets, the men of the Great Assembly, and then eventually Chazal, our sages, and all the rabbis that have come in all generations since then until this day. The Baal HaSulam's concern is fully manifest today. Anyone can go on Google or Amazon and type in the word Kabbalah and get thousands, if not tens of thousands of results. Chances are the large majority of them being totally and utterly inauthentic. Whether it's mixed with occultism, hermetic thought, idolatrous thought, just in all regards. New Age. There's a lot of Kabbalistic literature that has nothing to do with authentic Kabbalah. So in a way, what he wrote and the permission he received to write from the Creator and from the attainments that he received is to say that the generation was worthy of receiving such wisdom, and the generation was worthy of receiving the light to combat the darkness that manifested in ways of inauthentic writings, not to mention what is happening today in the great levels of distraction and darkness that we have in our generation. 2,000 years ago, we wrote down our oral law and tradition to what is today the Mishnah and the Gemara, being the Talmud, because of Pekuach Nefesh, because of the danger to the Jewish people. We needed to survive, and on the chance that we were to become completely annihilated, we needed to write it down. 100 years ago, religious girls began learning in Torah institutions and seminaries. Before that, there was no such thing. And if there was, it's been since ancient times that such a thing was in existence. And there was many opponents, even some of the greatest of the generation were opponents to this revolution. But the greatest of the generation who were for it said it was also pikuach nefesh, due to the great challenges of the Jewish people and their need for survival, that it was also necessary for young girls to learn and have a strong foundation in their tradition so that they can also help with raising strong Torah homes. I could say in the same light that in today's generation, a generation of great darkness that requires a great light, it is pikuach nefesh. It is an utmost necessity to learn these matters and to integrate them into the education systems for the sake of saving the Jewish people. Because there's more people leaving the path, and there's plenty of people being far from connecting to the path, because there's no opportunity even to expose them to such matters, because it's not the norm. And if they do get connected to it, chances are it's of inauthenticity and further veers them away from their desired purpose. There are arguments in regards to Jewish law as to when one should learn this, but to the point of the examples of women learning or the Talmud being written down, it is a different conversation, and the Baal HaSulam addressed such matters. And the notion that one has to wait until they're 40 is both inconsistent or needs to be clarified in context. Generally, the levels of learning that Torah or that law pertains to is beyond anything that's been revealed. Being that even all the revelations that the Baal HaSulam brought to us is just the first level of the Kabbalah that's available, that may not be revealed until future time. Only what was relevant to the generation's needs was revealed. There are greats like Rav Kook or the sons of Rebbe who have said, if one desires to serve the king properly, if one desires to refine themselves, or if someone's lost, then there's no barrier. They can connect and they can learn. If someone wants to learn for inauthentic or unworthy reasons, being for personal gain, to increase one's ego by means of knowledge and just knowledge, and the like, then it should be concealed from them until they're 40, if not forever, depending on their advancement. But that's a separate topic in itself. I think better to consider the Baal HaSulam's greatness and who he was and what he stood for, and the fact that he was deemed to be the greatest of the generation by the greatest of the generation, and that he also faced amazing opposition, similar to the Arizal, the Ramchal, the Baal Shem Tov, because matters that are most holy are always met with the greatest opposition. And Rabbi Breidowitz Shlita has also said so eloquently in Q&A that the Creator's will is brought into the world often by a Trojan horse. The world is not always ready to just get the revelation off the bat. So the Creator has to bring the principle and bring the idea with many coverings, many klipot. He brings as examples Zionism. Zionism is an ancient principle, being that we should love and have a holy pride for the Holy Land, because everything in this world is a branch of spiritual roots. And Eretz Yisrael is representing the Ratzon of Yashar Kel. Eretz is the language of Ratzon, of desire. Yisrael is split up into two words, Yashar, straight, and Kel, which is one of the names of the Creator. Meaning, all actions are for the purpose of goodness, for the purpose of serving, for the purpose of giving to the Creator and giving to the others. And the land itself is representing this spiritual state of consciousness, meaning to say, we can be in Israel, so to speak, while not living in Israel, if we can reach those very lofty levels of righteousness. Of course, there's plenty written that it is much easier and one's spiritual work can be expedited by being in the land itself, assuming they have a proper surrounding, a proper spiritual master, and friends, and the like. But Zionism came into the world not with this direct, holy understanding. Arguably, it even came with an anti-Torah perspective. But it was for good reason, as without it, arguably, we would not have the state of Israel today. He also brought feminism as an example. Feminism is amazing. The principle of feminism is empowering women with a sense of self, a sense of holy self, meaning the aspect of a woman pertains to different kohot, different powers that the Creator gave them, in contrast to male. Though we are all given both aspects, we all have male and female energies, but one is more dominant than the other. And for Jewish women, for example, who empower themselves and also learning and being involved in inner work and transmuting and assisting in transmuting the wisdom and principles and action to their children. And there's so much more to be said as far as how leadership in Judaism for women needs to be spoken about, it needs to be expressed more, and there needs to be more female leaders and the like. And for women to be connected to their true nature and ask themselves and discover what it means to be a Jewish woman. That's true feminism. But it's manifested in the world through klipa, through different means, to say the least. I don't have to speak so much about it. With those same principles, I would argue that sometimes the greatest lights and the greatest Torah also gets caught by the Trojan horse. It needs to come further into the world by the Trojan horse. There was many great opponents of the Arizal, and arguably even more so 100 years after his existence, given the cult leaders such as Shabbatai Tzvi or Jacob Frank, who came into existence and seduced masses with their scholarship and also the works of the Ari. And so, after the Torah of the Baal HaSulam came into being, since then we've had branches that are not so halachically inclined. And perhaps to this point, it's the desire for the Creator, that this wisdom be spread, even if it's not in its full authentic form, in order to expose the masses to it. Of course, with the intention that it will be fully pure and fully manifest in its way of serving the Creator, both in soul, more importantly, and body, which is also very important. The simple, practical stuff of Torah and mitzvot, shava, maisa, dibur, thought, speech, and action. whether it's a simple thing like saying a blessing or praying 3 times a day. If you're a male, putting tefillin on in the morning. From lo lishma comes to lishma. We have to acknowledge that we are born egoists, but slowly but surely we progress to the state of altruism, the Creator's help. And we'll paint that picture further. This is a fairly short essay, I think probably about 2 more classes, speaking about a time to act, and which is the mission statement of the integration of the inner matters of the Torah and its need to be disseminated. Let me just check the live stream, see if there's any questions or concerns. Not that I see. Alrighty. Thank you so much. If this is your first time tuning in, I highly recommend checking out the Matan Torah series, which is also on this channel, where we learn about the essence of Judaism and its intricacies and how to apply it. And also the notion of mutual guarantee and how we're all guarantors for each other and how the two are interconnected, being we could only receive the Torah by means of accepting that we're in this together, because we're all truly one soul. All the best.